following show may shock, disturb, and offend some viewers. The opinions, theories, and facts shared on this podcast are not widely accepted by the brainwashed masses, especially those who find dark humor offensive. Viewer discretion is advised.
Jeffrey Dahmer soaked in blood. The Unabomber blowing up. Waco, Texas, and Heaven's Gates. Aliens modified, meant for apes. JFK shot in the head by the CIA. Bigfoot and the Mothman. Son of Sam talking to dogs again. Witches, ghosts, and goblins. Mysterious noise and hauntings. Dark arts in the skull and bones. Most celebrities are probably cloned. So if you're feeling all alone, crack a beer and get stoned. I welcome you to the podcast Strange Brew. We're here to entertain you. We're here to entertain you.
It's about to get strange.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. Welcome back. I'm your host, Tomcat, aka Tom Thompson, the Reptilian. I have many different aliases. You can definitely check out my music on all music platforms. I'm very excited for this episode. I have Adrien, the realist. Am I saying that right? That's your pseudonym, you could say?
That's my name on TikTok, or my social media name.
You also do music, right?
I do some music. I used to do it for hobbies. So for a hobby across, Edmonton, Alberta area, Saskatchewan. Yes. Yeah.
I digged it, man. It was awesome. I saw a couple of your videos of you doing some of your speeches in front of a live audience. It's pretty incredible. I really like what you have to say. So do you want to introduce yourself, and then I'll kind of talk about why we're kind of doing this?
Well, my name is Adrien, the realist. Busted out in social media in 2019. I am the original creator of Murdered and Missing Indian Woman. It used to be Indian Woman, but it's Indigenous Woman. I guess I made it in 2008, but I said it was 2009. It had a lot to do with, underlying issues. It wasn't about racism. It was about underlying issues in regards to political policy within the Indian Act and why Native Americans, especially in the underlying issues, the cause of why some people go missing. 64 to 68% happen at the hands of our own people. And these are the things that I used to talk about, and it turned into Indigenous Women. So that's one. At the same time, too, why I'm on here is because at one time, I was one of the most controversial natives on social media, telling Native Americans what they didn't want to hear, especially like the 215 could be fake. All those kind of things. Murder, Missing Indigenous Women turned into nothing more than Black Lives Matter, a political organization. These kind of things that I talked about, only reason why I say these things is because there's underlying issues as to policy in Canada, and this is why I believe we came together.
And yeah, because I saw your videos and I was kind of I wanted to reach out to some of the people in the Indigenous community to have a conversation, right? Like I've even thought about maybe trying to go to the reserve near me and talk to some of the higher ups, the chiefs. But and the thing is that as same as our politicians, which are like, they don't represent us, right? Like there's more Indians from India in our government than there is Indigenous people, which I actually have a huge problem with. I think that's terrible. Like come on, like you serious? We have so many people with dual citizenship. So I've always wanted to reach this out and kind of have a conversation where we bring people together and put whatever differences aside happened in the past hundreds of years ago at the hands of always a corrupt government, because that's always where it stemmed from. But much like our governments and our politicians, and I've known people that have worked on reserves, the chiefs are doing the same thing by taking money, laundering it, and stealing it the same way the politicians do.
You are absolutely right. And honestly, I do believe that, what we are talking about and what you just said about the history in the past, yes, we also have to acknowledge it. Even though we have to let it go, we have to acknowledge how things came to be, especially with the Indian Act on our side, where they actually have total control, which breeds corruption. That's one. And the second thing that we like to talk about, maybe this will bridge our understandings between nations, is that our chief and councils don't have no control over their reservations. It is underneath the Northern Affairs Canada that is contracted to a band administrator, which is called the band administrator. He's the real chief, and that's how they have that convergence, because we don't have no power outside the reservation, and we have to follow policy. These are the things that probably happen at more of the municipal level as well too in Canada, and why a lot of corruption probably exists. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, and I agree, and I'd like to get into some of that stuff of what, like, maybe some of the history that you're aware of and stuff, because I'm open to hearing, and I want to bring people together, but also, like, I think that they've caused a big division between, especially the white, they call it the founding stock of Canadians, and the Native Americans, because there was, like, it's like, I think you like to class how, because people say Native American, Indian, Indigenous. I think you say you like to be classified as a Native American, right? As it goes, right?
Native American Indian. Mm-hmm. And the only reason why Native American Indian is because across all Canada, there's 40% of Canada falls under suit of treaties 1 to 11 Robinson Treaty. That is the reason why. And also all unceded territory, which is close to 59 to close to 60%, falls under the unceded territory. But on those treaties, it says Native American Indian. Mm-hmm. So when they say indigenous, the real terminology, if you were to look at it, means born on the land. Yeah, so therefore, everybody that is born here, white, black, Indian, East Indian, Asian, doesn't matter. They're indigenous to Canada, as it is the country, or the identity, or where they're actually, they get their laws from, their citizenship. You see, so therefore their identity is indigenous to Canada. Okay. Yeah. First Nations does not have no legal bearing. Aboriginal is just like abnormal. There's understandings, just like we're not original. You see, people have to understand that. And India was not even a country prior to 1900s. So people have to understand that India wasn't even a country. The word India derived from the word Indios, which means, from Greek and Roman terminology, people of exotic features or dark features or exotic lands. So we're more of the redskin features, and that's why they said from the river of Indus, that's what they'll call India. And that's why why people say we're not Indian. Well, damn right you are, if you understand the damn freaking terminology.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I know people need to really understand, like, how words are used and and I find it funny because, like, I would like to get into this stuff at some point too, is like, obviously I'm not a fan of this multiculturalist melting pot that they have been creating around us for a couple decades now, especially those from India. It is funny that they really like to, wave their flags of their countries while they come here, especially the Khalistani movement and some of the Sikhs and all that stuff that are pushing that. But they embrace the British identity in some regard for playing cricket, all these things. Even though what the British did to them, they still hold on to that identity that was essentially given to them, so to speak. But there's a lot of problems with that. Like, yeah, people were killed, but essentially 200,000 British troops held down almost like the entire country. And that means that there's people that have had to have gone along with it for it to be what it is today, right? And they, to me, of what I've seen, are some of the most entitled people that I've ever came across when it comes to, oh, give me this, give me that, give me everything because I just showed up here, right? And then now hardworking Canadians are suffering. And I've made this clear on the podcast too, is the Native population is suffering and has been for a long time. Like at the beginning of this podcast, we talked about the Highway of Tears and stuff like that, of the Indigenous women going missing, the Native women going missing. And there's ties to this stuff that we could get into, but there is this, I don't know. I've heard about, if we want to get into the conspiracy aspect of some of this stuff, that there is trafficking going on, but they're specifically looking for something within the blood of Native women. But that's a deeper, very deep conspiracy that I've heard about. But it's a serious problem, and they don't want to address it in any way. It's like, I think it's 35,000 people. It might be more than that. I think it's about 38,000 people go missing in Canada a year. In America, it's way more, but I think it's even more than that because they only give you what numbers they want to. But I think it's a serious problem.
So true. Uh, we can get into the aspect of conspiracy theories until, it's proven true anyways.
Yeah, it's
But
true.
at the same time, too, like when we look at these kind of statistics, especially when we're talking about what's going on, I could get it. I could dive into these reasons and understandings, but I think more or less we should more or less keep it more political.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
if we do, then it just turns into something that probably is another trap on their end. Because that's what our people have always fallen into. When we talk about one thing, it turns into another. How murder missing Indigenous women turn into a white hate nationalist, basic thing. I think the biggest answer that I can only say for Canada to actually pull up their shoes is think about nationalism first. Always nationalism, no matter what. And if we don't have no unified culture or understanding between its people, then and if we don't have our men and women standing up, and this is why I've always said I cannot stand with no white person who cannot say white pride. And the only reason why if I can't say that, if they can't say that, then they already lost.
yeah. I agree.
That's the power that they have, that they use, racism and all these isms. We have to walk out of the isms and say, this is the freaking truth. This is where we need to go. And this is what I've always said, even in Calgary there last time when I was standing there, I said to all the white people there, I said, the only reason why you guys are here is because you guys have been, people have went into your bank accounts and all these things and taken away all these things. You're starting to live like a Native American and all these things. You're losing these things. You're all these things. The only reason why you're here, I said, is because you guys got inconvenienced. And they said, oh, and I pissed them all off. It's not because I'm trying to piss anybody off. I just says because there's an underlying issue, and the underlying issue is lies of the corporate and also the federal government. Instead of us playing cowboys and Indians about who is a worse race because we're taught to hate each other, how about we just shut the fuck up, realize that we're sitting in a monopolized fucking like a casino, right? They're playing cowboys and Indians against each other, and guess who is telling the rules? Is the fucking Canadian government. They're the ones that are making the rules for us to hate each other. Why don't we just step away?
Yeah,
Step away from these bastards.
Rule over people, right? Which I've embraced that recently, of the idea of nationalism, and like over the last couple of years, and being proud to be white, because I was told I can't be, like, essentially, even my cousin grew up in, I mentioned him before on the show, he grew up in Toronto, one of the most melting pot cities almost in the entire world, was like the minority in his high school, was the only white kid, and he was like, I grew up with all different types of people and got along with them and had all different friends, but he was like, until recently when they told me I'm at fault for everybody's problems and I can't be white because I'm a hateful for being proud of my own people, he's like, that's when I had enough. And all these isms come from communism. I truly believe Marxism. They use these terminologies to divide people. Like the word racism comes from a guy named William Henry Pratt, I think is his name, and people would consider him racist because he said shit like you can kill the Indian but don't kill the man, or something like that, during like the early 1900s, like pretty horrible shit. And then you guys are using his words, and then the word racist, it supposedly comes from, like, at least popularized by Leon Trotsky, the communist that facilitated the deaths of hundreds and millions of white people, white Christians specifically, in the Soviet and Russia, right? So we have to understand why these terms are being thrown around and used. And now, like, I've seen that where I'm like, I used to get really along, like, I was always friends with natives growing up. I played football, friends. And then I see this now recently where everyone's like, fuck the white man, hate him. He did this to us. And I'm like, I'm always trying to point out that it wasn't us. It wasn't like my ancestors that did that. It was the government. Like, you think the average person that was coming here, a lot of times forced to come here, the Irish came here in larger numbers than the black slaves did. And do you think that they were like, oh yeah, let's just do this to these people? I think that most people are probably like, I'm foreign to this land. I don't know what's going on. I just want to try to create something from what there is here. And there's a lot of sadness in stuff that has taken place in the past and detrimental effects of what colonization has done to certain countries. And I 100% will agree with that. But without the natives and the whites, the bringing them together, there is no country called Canada. There is none of this stuff that we see and exist in today. And there used to be this very much this pride that we kind of knew who we were. We had the stereotypical, like, white Canadian with a beard, but also the natives that were also coming together. And I was taught this in school. Now I think it's a little more Marxist, but this, like, a thing of we all came together and we put our differences aside. And my problem is still with, like, people bringing up the residential schools and stuff like that. That was the fucking Vatican. Like, people don't even point back to, like, who is facilitating all of these things that were done to your people, which I find is still disgusting to this day. And people need to acknowledge who was doing it, why it was happening, and why we're still talking about it.
Yes, I totally agree. However, like, I like to go back on a couple of things. Being a part of understanding the treaties and relationships, like my grandmother, she was part of I think there's 11 small boy children that went to the residential schools out of them all, right? And my grandfather was the same way as well, too. See, I've always said, my grandma said, there's nothing we could do about the past. It's just what it is. That's one thing. But what do we learn from it? See, the residential schools, yes, the Vatican and the church was involved, but it was also a policy. And the policy was stated this. There was the first time they tried to go make a country out of Canada, but it wasn't Canada. They went the first time, they got rejected. The second time, it was a 60-40 split. That was between at that time, the Pilgrims at that time and the Native Americans. And this is where they had, before the treaties happened. And when they had the treaties, when they signed into the treaties, the planes were riddled with $5 bills because we didn't know what to do with them. What were we supposed to do with $5 bills? We threw them away. And this was stated, and what was going on is that the Indian Act came in as soon as, because in 1876 to 1878, depends on where it was, the Indian Act. This is exactly what happened to Irish and Scottish. What happened to the Irish and Scottish is that the Irish and Scottish did not want to oblige or fall into certain policy over their land from the British Crown. So what happened was, if they could not do these things to the Crown, Invictus something came through where they started, if we can't change these people's identity, and because they had tribes and they had their own clans in Irish and Scottish at the time. If they're not going to be a part of these things, then we'll put this new law that when they're married, the dukes will sleep with their wives the first night. And the reason why is because they said, if we can't get them to bow down, we'll breed it out of them, you see? So now you have, after 200 years, the British and the Scottish are now intertwined with blood territory and dukes. This is where you get all these things. And what happened was, a long time ago, before Scotland, Ireland, France and England even became a country. It used to be called the territory of Germania. All that used to be Germania. It wasn't a country. It was just a territory, just like like South America, but Germania. So when they came through Roman conquest, they finally broke everything. And now all these tribes were living. The great white man was just living just like the Native American, running around with his bow and arrows, all the sweats and all their practices. Now, I'm not against colonization. However, the white man in Germania forgot that they have blood ties to the land. What I mean by blood ties to the land is you came from Mother Nature. This is natural law. right? Because that is their territory. What colonization did was separate your culture and your gods and your belief into your land is sweetgrass or whatever it is, into your land, and then give it 400 or 500 years, nobody owns nothing in this taxation. So this is what happened to Canada, especially. And when they made Canada, they had a thing called what do you call? It was like not only a Tea Party tax, but a Land Claims Act. So you had 5 years to make your lot, your land. So when you claim your land, it was free. It was totally free. And the reason why it was free is because you needed to develop that land. If you developed that land, chopped the trees down, and made your farm, that became yours. If you didn't do prior to that, you lose it. And then after World War I, you had these Tea Party taxes and all these things. And now, when you have social income and all these things, you get tied into the system, from the gold standard to a creditized system, and therefore now you lose your land to the aspect of land to a plow deep. Mm-hmm. So these are the things that people have to understand. If they stop paying taxes, truly, you don't own the land in Canada. Unless we start having nationalism and kick these conglomerates or whatever these people out, because everything is monetized underneath the 1972 Act of the credit system. So people have to know these things. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does make sense totally, because it's so funny. There's a guy named Alex Collier. He was a guy that was deeply into the idea of the reptilian stuff. Very conspiracy, but he did this speech once that's been shared all over the internet. I knew this guy, but I think before anyone else did. Like, I was looking into this stuff for a long time, and he's like, how do we live on a planet that we have to pay? You're born on a planet that you have to pay to exist in. Is that one of the craziest concepts, right? And that, like, I've always believed taxation is theft. Now what they've done, instead of what could have happened, right? Like, if history was different and we kind of just blended together in some form we did, in some form we didn't. But now they've used this idea of like, oh, you have your own land, you have your reservations, which we've kind of talked about when we did our phone call kind of thing, is like, then it becomes like a communist thing of like, you now are dependent on the state, on these reservations and the money coming from the state. You know what I mean? Like, because you've talked about this before, and I've heard you talk about stuff like this, where it's like, and it becomes this thing where it becomes sheltered, or go over here. We don't want to look at this. And that's like a big problem to me, because we should be blending together and embracing what that means. Right. So what is your thoughts on that?
Well, what causes the divide in racism in Canada isn't so much about the cowboy and Indian. But I think it's probably because we live on natural law on the reservation where we don't pay taxes. Mm-hmm. And the white man lives on a man-made law, not so much common law, man-made law. And they question why, So, and they question why they have to pay $19 billion a year to 643 nations, okay? First Nations right across Canada. But here's the funny thing. They spent $21 billion, I believe, to Nova Scotia or New Brunswick. I think that has less people than the totally equivalent of Native Americans across Canada. That's just what it is. But mind you, are we total Canadian citizens? That's the other argument. To tell you the truth, I'm a Canadian citizen when I'm getting penalized. But I'm a Native American when I try to look for answers when it comes down to healthcare or education, because therefore they have the educational standards. If I was on Blue Cross, which is probably the lowest form of healthcare in Canada, right? If I was on welfare, I'd have a better time being on welfare underneath the Canadian standards. But since I'm Native, they'll throw me underneath Indian Affairs, which is all generic. You see?
Yeah.
Really weird. But I'm just saying, it's a divide, and it has a lot to do with the separation of natural law and resources, because underneath the treaty, we never relinquished our land. It was understand to unity between the Crown and Native Americans. Now, this is the reason why United Nations came from 2000 to 2025 in order. When the Emergency Act came here, they spent $4.5 billion to 203 nations in BC, and they wanted them to sign underneath United Nations. That's one. Secondly, you're going to start seeing all these cows and plows deals because the federal government does not have legal what do you call ties, or they don't have the
Jurisdiction over.
over Canada, because they realize that Canada is not a country no more, and they realize that they don't own the deed to Canada, and it falls underneath Native American. This is why last year in October you started seeing AFN, Assembly of First Nation, headed by the Liberal government and Justin Trudeau, try to get full authority under Section 35 or whatever it was from the all treaty nations to put under an Assembly of First Nations, which was put in place by the Liberal government for treaty negotiations, and it would trump all territories. But because of a lot of actions, especially like Rima Crow trial and my team, we went down to the Senate in Ottawa. We posted these United Nations questions, and especially how it will affect the land stewardship acts of all white farmers across Canada. They were going to use Native Americans to overstep water rights, and especially any kind of Native American rights over white farmers, to kill the white farmer off their privatized land, because they knew that Native Americans had the total jurisdiction over it, but they were going to use United Nations and environmental issues and aspects to trick the system and municipal government to destroy the white person.
You're giving me chills, man. It's fucking crazy that they're able to do this stuff, right? And like, I just wanted to say it is nuts, because like Trudeau is a full blown communist. Like, I have a whole like episode that eventually we'll do about his father, like, who was a full blown, went around to communist countries, praised them, and then his son did the same thing. And the UN is literally like a corporatized dictatorship style New World Order. Like, and it's crazy. And I want you to finish, but I just want to say, like, this idea of the illusion is Canada, the myth is Canada, has been brought up a lot by a lot of people. And I'm like, I've said to people, I'm like, every country is a corporation. It doesn't matter where you live. They're all corporatized and controlled by BlackRock and Vanguard, amongst the Rothschild families. And at some point we can, this episode on next one, but a lot of the stuff does go back to Jewish people. It's a fact. It's what they're doing. They've done this since the dawn of time. There's a lot of history to back that up, but it is crazy that they'll try to use these things against everybody else. And if you pay attention to what's happening in South Africa, they're slaughtering white farmers, and they almost starve themselves out by doing this.
Amen. And I totally agree. The way I look at it is, I don't want to say the word Jew, because I work with, we work with traditional Jews from New York and Montreal and everything like that.
Yeah,
and these guys hate
all bad. It's Zionists.
Yeah, but the traditional Jews don't like the Zionists. They do not like the Zionists. So this is why I say this, and people look at me as controversial, and I'll tell you, so the Big Dipper, you have to understand, has 7 stars.
Go back. You froze for a sec. Just go, like, just a couple seconds.
Okay.
Ago. Just explain.
Okay. Well, I grew up with my grandfather's teachings, which is the Big Dipper, and it has seven stars, which is the 7 grandfather's teachings, which is like love, honorability, all these things that you have to do. You have to have wisdom. You have to have strength. You have humility. All these small things, but the Big Dipper, every season it goes 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees.
Yeah.
Now you put that on the ground, it becomes the Native American swastika. Okay, that's what we consider the Thunderbird symbol, only because that Thunderbird means everything holy. So if the Thunderbird goes to a culture or a community, and that community is ran by, let's just say, corruption, the truth will destroy it. You know what I mean? Those kind of small things. That's what we believe. So with those kind of teachings, you have to understand how that this is, you can look at the Nuremberg trials. You can look at all these things. You name it. Karl May, spelled with a K, Karl. He was an author in Germany from 1890 to 1911, and he made these books, The Adventures of Vitanu. He was an Apache chief running around America with his German counterpart, and he made over 200 million copies of these books, and in this book, which is ironic, this Apache chief ran around with a Navajo swirling log. The swirling log was the swastika, Navajo swirling log in the books. So he adopted these things. He loved these books. And he actually saw Karl May in 1911. I didn't even know where, but that was it. And in the Nuremberg trials, these SS soldiers said that Hitler would always give these books to them. You got to read these books. You have to understand these books. And a lot of them had the swastika in it. And people have to understand in 1939, what do you call him? Micmac met and shook Hitler's hand due to the Chancellor of Britain or whatever, what is it, Chancellor, whatever his name was. But they met in 1939 and they shook hands. In 1940, ironically, just because of all this crap, there was a proclamation in America that we would put down our Native American swastika, ironically, you see? And then here's go
I
ahead.
will say I think Hitler is the most lied about person in history. And I don't know if you're aware of who Jake Shields is. I bring him up because he is someone who is actually doing a lot of good work. He's an MMA fighter that is bringing up a lot of this stuff of like the Nuremberg trials was just to show like they're doing all this stuff to show you one side of it, but they're doing sleight of hand and not show you the other side. I do think that history is a fucking lie. There's things you can point to, of course, like documented footage of people and writings of what people were experiencing, but anything coming from the government or especially Hollywood is just fabricated lies. And in Canada, you can't deny the Holocaust. All the 6 million people died. I'm not going to deny that on camera. But this idea that we were sold all these ideas that are pretty much nothing more than fabrication, like they were just created to instill a certain ideology into it. One of the biggest threats they saw was nationalism. They never wanted this to happen again. They never wanted an economy to be brought out of the rubble and to like house people. And like, if you actually study what was going on then, you would be given, you given a house. As long as you grow food, and this is in Germany during the National Socialist takeover, if you grew vegetable gardens, you could keep your home, and you would have a loan that would actually give every German citizen a home. And then if you had a kid, your loan would be cut 25%. You have 2 kids, 50%. 3 kids, 75%. And then if you had 4 kids, your loan would be cut. Your house would be given to you essentially. And the same thing. And then if you had 10 kids, you get the mother's cross, which is a real thing that exists and stuff. So I don't think a lot of people realize what kind of world we could have lived in if people actually understood what was happening and how, like, even like this is a crazy fact to me. Jesse Owens, a Black American who was at the Olympics when it was in Germany, said he got more respect in Nazi Germany than he did at home, where he was treated like an other compared to everybody else. And Hitler actually waved to him and gave him it's in his autobiography, gave him a nice wave. So I always like to bring that up to people that are like, everything you've been taught is conditioned into you to believe what you know.
Well, people don't understand, what treaty was signed, for the induction of the United States and, Britain to come together, especially with, Roosevelt and whatnot, and especially when they had that understanding in the water. People have to understand that 3 things were asked from the United States because they made a mistake the First World War. The United States even openly admitted it. Well, after they finished this World War I with Germany, they asked to be a part of the League of Nations. And you know what Britain said? Go screw yourself. We don't want you here. We still are pissed off because you guys got independence from the crown.
Yeah.
So World War II, what did he say? We're not going to be involved with this war. United States said that. We're not going to be involved.
The false flag event. Right?
Exactly. And then what happened was when they had this treaty and United States, we're not going to be involved. And then, Churchill and everybody came together and said, okay, if you come over here, we'll help each other. Okay, United States said we want 3 things. First and foremost, we want reprimands. After everything is done, we want reprimands. It just finally got paid off in 2019. World War II reprimands finally got paid off in 2019 to the United States. That's reprimands. That's the first one. The second thing they wanted was to be a part of the League of Nations, which became United Nations.
The Communist New World Order.
Yes, and the third thing they wanted was Jerusalem for,
And that's just
there
both
you go.
world wars are like they were created to give the Jews Israel. That's like a fact. It's funny that
Yeah.
if you just like think about things like objectively, that's what I've always tried to think, is just like look at come at things at an objective angle. Like I don't know really what's going on. I don't know what the truth actually is, but I'm going to question everything. That's what the foundation of the show was. Like at the beginning, we were like, we just drank and we would just get drunk and talk about conspiracies. That's kind of how this show started. And then we built a pretty big following. And we are definitely censored, but it's just funny. You start to look at things like, okay, so they get hit by Japan, but then they go instantly into Germany. It's not like this thing of like, okay, Japan hit us, we need to attack Japan. And if you actually like read what I can't even say his name that often, Adolf, the big H or whatever, you read what he talks about like Japan and how he respects the Chinese and different cultures. He just loved his own people and his nation, and actually had it was highly respected, and actually was interested by native culture and stuff like that too. If you read actually some of his stuff, it's interesting, right? And you start looking at these things and you question these things, it becomes clear that we weren't told the whole story, that history is written by those who are the victors, right? And even in regard to some of the things that have happened in Canada too, and I'll admit that. And you could ask all my friends I grew up with and fans of the podcast or people, I've always been fascinated by Native culture and the different gods and the spiritualism of it and invoking these things. And I've taken a lot of mushrooms in my life. I was like, which way do I point? And those helped me awake. Like they awoke in my like third eye to feel like I was connected more to nature. I've always respected that ideology, that culture of being respectful to the land and to actually like utilize and be thankful for what it's giving you. Because God, if the God that we think of, all of us are essentially praying, in my opinion, to the same ultimate benevolent force, hopefully, and that he's given the energy has given us everything that we need. But there is questions about like were we dropped here at some point, you know what I mean, by some sort of force, because especially the white people that get burnt in the sun and all that shit, like the things that don't make sense. But if you start to look at that stuff of being respectful towards what we were given and being thankful, we've lost that. Like it's been pushed this radical individualism of like everyone needs to just, it's about me and mine and all that stuff. And we've lost this connection to like, and I was going to say this earlier, is like this idea that Canada was like a home to all of us, especially, you know, in the 80s, 90s, when everyone tried to like collectivize and come together and be proud of who they were and have celebrations and connections to everybody. It used to feel like a big family. And that's the idea of nationalism, is we're supposed to feel connected under a single national identity and culture and try to blend in the good aspects of both and try to bring us together.
You know, nationalism was always a good thing until recently. Everybody always knew that nationalism was this. We love Canada because of hockey. We loved Canada because of maple syrup, and we said A all the time, and all these things like that. We love these things. And at the end of the day, when we started having this influx of, you know, what is that, 3 million over the last 6 years, 500,000 immigrants come through, 98,000 Chinese troops come through here, and they have free access. Yeah, they have free access. And the way I look at the whole, and this is what I said in 2008, there was an article a long time ago, and this is what it was also stated to us a long time ago too. In 2008, within 12 to 14 years, they even said that there's going to be a change where Native Americans will have a lot of power, and they had a lot to do with the Native American understanding of resources. But at the same time, too, in 2008, everybody was saying invest into water. Okay, so that means that there's going to be an emergence between how does this Canada, you know, overtake its land? You know, how does it, you know, how does it converge in these things? And so we already knew that there was going to be a big change in regards to the resources in Canada. When this thing started with what do you call the Great Reset? If you looked in 2015, I could send you this picture, especially from this great guy here. He sent it to me. if I could remember his name. But anywho, he sent me some pictures here and everything like that from the Prince's Trust. It was an email from Perry Bellegarde. In 2015, the Great Reset was already planned, the COVID-19 initiative in 2015. So these things have to be understood. In 2017 and 18, Justin Trudeau had what do you call lunch with the MNO, Métis Nation of Ontario, which happened to be Pretendians. Okay, this is how they're going to take over the land. Bill C-53 was getting pushed in, which makes if United Nations partake in Indigenous, which is in Native American, Métis, and Inuit, and if you combine all three, and there was going to be a resource war, and who was going to be the middle child of all of it was going to be United Nations of 80%. Now you go figure how Canada was going to lose power of 80% of its country. Remember that? I don't know if you heard about that, but these kind of things had to be put in place, and it had a lot to do with the separation of culturalism and nationalism. If you have too many international people, sexism, LGBTQ, all these isms, if you realize that they made us all fight each other internally for our children, for the school, for power, the 15-minute district ain't nothing but a reservation, all these things that come to play, and we forget about what's actually happening to the water and the land. Remember, Canada only exists by policy of the land. It's not, a country only exists by the land. So if they lose power, if we lose power to the land by policy in every single thing, and Justin Trudeau is the only prime minister in Canada that spent more billions than all prime ministers combined.
It's fucking crazy.
Yeah. And that bastard shut down that pipeline in BC. That bastard, not only that, with the help of George Soros, made certain that pipeline never went through BC coast and made that whole coast into a bear sanctuary, You already know that Justin Trudeau wasn't here to be a prime minister, but to fucking take down Canada. And now he's sitting on his board here with Mark Carney, who never got fucking elected.
Mark Carney's a fucking predator, man.
And he shut, remember, Wexit and all this fucking bullshit with this financial bullshit. He's the reason why for it. So now you have all these cronies.
They installed
exactly.
a dictator. They literally installed someone into power that nobody voted. I just talked about this in a recent video on TikTok. I'm like, it's fucking crazy that people don't see what's happening. And this is why, like, I thought this might be one of the most important conversations that I've had in this podcast, because like we need to realize that they're coming after all of us, and we need to collectivize.
Here's another thing. And now the trucker convoy was started by, he says, Kim Choi and his girlfriend, who is Asian, and they're also in affiliation with the Black Dragons, who are also a part of Russia. Now you're looking at all these things, and when you're looking at Kim Choi, and then you have Tamara Lich, who came from the liberalized side with Peter Downey. Peter Downey was from Saskatchewan, who was a part of the Maverick Party at the time, which was liberal. They came to Alberta. Okay, you got Tamara Lich, you got Peter Downey, and then not even that, they had to start this. They had to bring all politicalized parties in Canada to separate them afterwards. So therefore, they needed a reason for the Emergency Act. Now, this is the reason why.
Part of it was because of Dagalon and stuff like that, of like, a white nationalist part, like we need to take that. That's part of why they called it. And it's just like they needed a boogeyman, like Russia.
Yeah. See, I don't mind all this bullcrap with Dagalon. I even talked to him sometimes now and then. I was supposed to go to his event last year, and I believe in the Proud Boys.
Jeremy's a good dude.
I believe in the Proud Boys and all these other things, because when a white person says something, it shouldn't be just because, it's a white person that says something. No, it's a person that says something. It's a person that said something.
That's why I think you would like Jake Shields' podcast, because Jake Shield had one of the dudes in the Proud Boys. Like, I like listening to things objectively. Like, he had David Duke on, like, which is a crazy thing, the leader of the KKK for 30 years, and he left it. But if you actually just like sit down and listen to these people, and you're like just objective.
I did. Prince Albert, okay, these guys in Prince Albert, there was a case in Prince Albert. In my reservation, he got shot in the back by this white supremacist Prince Albert at a pawn shop in 1988, 87. But anywho, these groups of people over here, because of my rhetoric, and I'm talking about the swastika, they wanted to talk to me. And then I said, okay, let's have a real discussion. So we did, okay. And you know what? We're not different. What it was about his identity, that nobody should be shitting on the white man because he's white. And I totally fucking agree. You know, and it's because if we can't be all equal, that swastika has 4 colors and 4 directions. 4 colors. The white man has the power of fire, we believe. The yellow man has the power of the sky, which is Asian, like, you know, the internet, we believe. The black man has the power of the water. Ironically, apparently he doesn't swim no more. I don't fucking know. But, you know, but now the red man has the power of the land. Those are the 4 colors that we believe. And we also believe that there's basically 13 months in the year and 28 days. That's what we believe. And then there's these cycles.
Crazy, dude.
So all that has a lot to do astrology, and we try to bring these things into the idea so that people understand these things. But when it comes down to the swastika and the white man, all of a sudden he's hated because of white supremacy. Well, you're going to have to let that go. We need to go back to the past to correct our identity, because honestly, I believe, and I'm not trying to be racial in anything, I looked at American History X, and you know what? I believe in a lot of fucking policy, but people make it racist. It's the policy that I really understand if it is supposed to be common law, not because of the moralities of men. I believe everybody's equal, no matter what it is, as long as you have the tenacity in the heart to believe. It's not because of your race. It should be because of your drive as trying to be better as a person. That's what I believe.
I have a couple of things to say this, but I'll say this one to get your opinion on. I think the idea of multiculturalism was instilled by communists. Essentially, the idea will never work. It never has worked unless there's like 2 cohesive groups. Maybe if the whites and the natives can actually really bring. That's why I want to do this. We need to bring it together and come together. And I believe we did in the past. There's a couple of things I want to get to because I'm just curious to hear your opinion. But I've always said the idea of multiculturalism doesn't work, because if you have too many different cultures, different ethnicities, languages brought in, especially in full flux, too many, then it's actually diversity equals division, because you're causing division between all these people. You have people speaking the national anthem in Punjabi, man. I would rather hear it in some native tongue from the Aboriginals, or like, you know, than these fucking people dancing on our ice during hockey games and celebrating their culture that they have billions of them in their own continent. And like, that's why I'm like wanting to bring this together, because white people are now less than 8% of the worldwide population. We are becoming just like the Native Americans were. So we have to stick together, or we're all going to be erased. And it's going to be what I believe the clergy plan is part of, is essentially diluting the intelligence of nations, and is essentially having a slave race of people. And one thing I just wanted, like, your views on multiculturalism and the idea of diversity being pushed on us. And also the idea that what bothers me too is you have all these Indian people showing here from India and then using what happened to the indigenous as their excuse to actually colonize us.
It's kind of, they should just shut the fuck up. That's what
I've heard that so many times, man. It drives me insane. I'm like, what the fuck are you guys? You guys are just... I'm not a fan.
I will say this, however. I'm going to look at the camera and tell this to the people. We know the truth, and you know the truth. We're not retards. I don't know where we had to use isms to make it so freaking like the gray zone of politics. Like anybody really gives a fuck about you. Nobody gives a fuck about me. Nobody gives a fuck about anybody who wants to put a dildo in your ass or whatever. Nobody cares. Really, nobody cares. We care that you're okay. We care that we're okay. But the truth is, they're using these isms to get to your feelings. And the underlying issue is, if you looked at every single policy, has a lot to do with land. Your feelings and land. Your feelings and land. So now they're gonna pass a policy based on your feelings. And what they're really doing is cutting my tongue out, and you're happy. But the day you realize that they're fucking over your land and you want to have a tongue, you want to cut your tongue out too. You have to understand that we have to come together. That's one. But secondly, when I look at the aspect of things, the white people have to realize we have rights that you don't have. Why don't we use them together? You guys got tongues that we don't have. and we put them together. Imagine, instead of the great Indian and the great fucking cowboy fighting each other, if they came together and said, well, this is fucking bullshit. Why are we playing in a monopoly that the government is like the monopoly game? They run the money, they run the hotels, they run everything. But what we have to realize is we never gave them the right over our land, and you fought for the land too. So let's make it our land. And why are they having policy on this land? Because we let them. It's a fucking fictitious world, and they're just trying to change.
You're saying exactly what needs to happen. And like, I believe when you get chills like that, well, I always call it the cracking egg effect, when you just feel these chills down your spine, it's like your essentially your consciousness and your the pineal gland in your brain expanding, your third eye, so to speak. And when I have conversations like these, I feel whatever is out there connecting us and what that needs to be said and done. And yeah, there is no identity if we blend everything together and believe in this idea of multiculturalism. Everything is gone. And the thing is, they're like, well, what? Like, I hear this all the time. Well, you white guys, you go white people. And they're always like, you did this. I'm like, I have nothing to fucking do with what happened hundreds of years ago or what happened 10 years ago. I'm only looking out for, like, trying to look out for myself, my nation. And at the end of the day, if the nation crumbles, it's going to affect the fucking new population of all these Indians that want to bring in their culture. And I have a huge problem with the amount of influx of Indians that they've brought in from India, because, like, it's destroying our culture. Go to Toronto, go to any major city. They've literally taken over. There's places up north where white people can't find jobs now because they've taken over all of, like, the gas station, every job, every summer job that any, like, even native kids or white kids would go to, like, for the summer to work at. And now that's gone because they've just paid wage subsidies for these people, all at the behest of our own tax dollars too, of paying these people to replace us. The great replacement is a real thing, and it's not only happening just to white people across the board. This is multiculturalism has only been pushed in white countries. I've seen the video footage from England. One of my co-hosts is Irish. He's from Ireland. He's pissed about what's happening. It gets brought up in the show a lot, even like we talked about cattle mutilation and aliens, right? But it got brought up at the end because he's seeing his tax dollars pay to house all these refugees that are stabbing kids and all sorts of crazy shit. And it's disturbing to see that they're using people as a weapon to essentially destroy the country from within. And if white people, and I believe native people, do not band together, there will be this erosion of all of our cultures into this melting pot of socialist communist hellhole.
Amen. You know, from day one, when Tamara Litch and all these people phoned me when they were sitting at in Winnipeg in the middle of Canada, asking the Native Americans and people to come along, I did my part that February. I went to freaking Camp Hope. I sit there for 3 days trying to bring these white people and these natives together. There was a lot of division, and a lot of people, native people, didn't want them to get them together. And when I bring that swastika over there, and the reason why I bring it over there is because you got to remember, there are 6 million Jews that died. That's true. I'm not denying that. But at the same time, too, even after the war, we were not even allowed off our reservations till 1951. And I'm not trying to throw it in people's heads, but I'm making a point here. 1978, we're not allowed our customs and culture. 1979 in Canada. 1990, we're not even allowed to speak our Cree language until 1990 in the public school system. The reason why I bring that swastika over there is because that's still our swastika, first and foremost. Secondly, nobody will ever take that culture away again, because that was the basis of the seven grandfather teachings. And now the Native Americans are so ignorant, they don't even know anything about their own culture. So if it's offensive, I don't give two shits. And when they say the 6 million Jews died, well, the way I look at it is this: Canada and United States, I don't give two shits about the aspect of Jewish wars. I don't. And the reason why is because even when we went to that war, we lost more than we did when we stopped off those boats. And not to be offensive of anybody at all, but if you're going to talk about Jews, then remember, you're stepping on 100 million Native Americans, and we're still in a concentration camp. So it's ironic that they're talking about Jews and every single thing when they don't even want to look at their own fucking backyard and their dirty laundry.
And that is true. I'm not going to say that 6 million people didn't die, but there's a lot of people that can point to that it's not even close to that shit, and they've revised all of those numbers. Even Auschwitz revised it. They said 4 million, then that was 6 million. So like,
Yep.
and I'm just questioning things. And we did the Proca Elders of Zion, and I was like, I'm just questioning things and showing you information that they're presenting, rabbis, a bunch of things, and they're at the head of a lot of this stuff. The NGOs that are pushing multiculturalism and mass immigration and all that stuff, right? And the average white person that existed in Canada didn't want that to happen to the natives. Like that's not like something that like my grandfather would never even think of that shit. He was a firefighter in Toronto, a chief, cared about people, and like if you start to like look at these things, it's like it's always the government.
It's not the white people. It's not the white people.
It's
I
always
look at the
them
white people. Yeah.
trying to
Sorry.
insert.
Yeah.
No,
It just gets me. It gets me angry. I'm sorry to cut you off. It just gets me angry that people would say it's always the white people, and I get it. It's bred racism. It's all these things down the line. I know I was the savage Indian and all these things, and you name it. But I know it had a lot to do with one thing. How do you break culture from a land? You know what I mean? How do you break culture from a land if you believe? And I'll give you a perfect example. Métis, the word Métis, and you heard the word Métis all across the land, but Métis means a mati, which means a block of wood. It does not mean half-breed. What it means is this: the Métis only come from the Cree. It does not come from the Blackfoot, doesn't come from the Micmac, does not come from anywhere else, but only comes from the Cree, because that's where it started from. Mati means you come from the land, just like a block of wood, but your roots got cut off. So therefore, you are us, but you can't say you're from the land unless you choose either Nihiao or Muniao. Muniao, they say, is a white man, and Nihiao is native. But what Nihiao means is people like us, like me, and Muniao is people not like us. You see? Now, the white man could be Nihiao when he understands that the laws, and he has to love his land, he has to respect his water, because without water or land, you are nobody. You know what I mean? That's 100%. How we look at it. So that's why we say, when I went down to these whether it's Barhead or Calgary or the trucker convoy, or whether it's in front of everybody, I said, you guys are going to have to be the new Native American now. And that means you guys have to fight for a land, because if the treaties fall, this is why the United Nations and all of them are trying to negotiate. If the treaties fall, treaty is land and protection. And now, if we lose the protection of land, Canada is virtually for sale. And this is why Justin Trudeau is trying to make as many deals as he can with the Native Americans right now, because he wants to buy out Canada underneath this clause. And here's the funny thing: the Fortune 500 companies that all these let's say these the $190 million from my reservation, all these Treaty 6 negotiation deals that are coming through, it goes to the Fortune 500 companies. And this is what I want people to understand, that most of the trading stocks right now are in the dark black stocks, not in the like in the stocks. They're in the dark black stocks, which means most of the big companies are now trading in the underground section. So what's going to happen in 3 years? All these billions of dollars that the Native Americans just got bought into for their treaty land entitlement and for their cows and plows deals, if they crash, which they have done prior to a lot of things with Libya and all these things, they could artificially drop all this $1 billion, because money is a percentage game, and they can crash it. And now, with all those legal tenders, they don't even have to pay you nothing, and then now you just sign into them working into your land
and enslaving us all too. And it is so fun, because I've always respected the Native culture and the idea of the water flows and where the spirits go. That's why you do have a lot of like hauntings. My first love was always the paranormal. I've played around with Ouija boards when I was really young. I felt connected to something outside of this my entire life. I do believe that we all have some sort of connection to why we're here and what we're doing here. And I even at some point, I would would love to bring you back on for an episode about like native folklore, because that shit fascinates me. And there's so much to that, of these like the spiritual essence of the things that exist around us and are maybe communicating with us, that I think I've seen on mushrooms. And it's interesting because I've done a lot of high dose of psilocybin. And I've seen these I don't know if you've ever done it. I'd be interested to hear if you've ever done it. But
psilocybin, yeah.
It's worth. I've seen tribal patterns like lucidly through my. It's the craziest looking shit in the world, because you're like connecting to like stuff that we don't have connection with anymore. And I've seen like, I always like, I call them like, they call them the fractals or whatever. These translucent. I always joke they look like Harry Potter when he puts on the cloak. You can still see him, but I see all these like essentially it looks like tribal patterns within these fractals. And I've always like loved being outside. Like I've watched movies with my wife by the fire. I watched American Werewolf in London, high as fuck on mushrooms by the fire at a projector. It was amazing. I'm a big fan of horror movies, so I was like they're pushing the boundaries and stuff. But I felt like this connection to something outside of it. But I would be interested to hear what you think about these folklore ideas, about the natives actually having contact with the white people before the quote unquote Europeans showed up, because there's stories like the Wagas. There's a guy named I have one of his books. I can't remember his name, but he does all these. It's gonna come to me. He has all these videos where he like breaks down like stuff that people don't want to talk about. He is a anthropologist, and he talks. He has this whole. I would actually send it to you because you might find this interesting, about the connections to the stories of, especially this is South Dakota, I think, of the Wagas, that the natives wrote about the stories of meeting white people, and then they were sewing swastikas onto their clothing and stuff like that at this time, and that they gave them essentially like this. This principle and these like essentially stories, but they looked a lot different. They were giants, so people think it could be the Nephilim idea or some of these other ideas. But there's also the moon-eyed people, of these people that had big blue eyes and stuff. So I'm curious to what you think about these like ancient folklore stories. Of is it true that maybe there's a guy I had on that worked in Nunavut? I've told you about it, and he was pointing to the idea that they're not the Europeans that we think of today, but there was contact maybe even thousands of years ago with natives and white people, and they actually came together and lived in harmony for a couple of generations, as far as what I've looked into. But I'd just like to hear your ideas of what you think about that because we know the Vikings came, but there's stories about other things.
Well, they had the star people, is what we used to call them. So the star people, they had a war in the heaven. They made us because we were half blood, right? Yeah. So what happened was, we are from the land and they came, and they're not supposed to come near us because we're too closely related. But what they were saying is that we used to go for the gold and all these other things and all these small things, and then there's a war in heaven, right? And now they gave dominion upon us. Yeah. And this is why, and upon that time, if you looked at all the Cree and the Blackfoot and everything, there was the Great Flood here. Okay, so the Great Flood went right across, and the Cree understanding is that there was no land, and we had to send a beaver, and finally the muskrat went all the way down, grabbed the dirt, and a guy named Wisakichak or Nanabush blew onto the land, to the dirt, and it slowly built the land and made the land. And finally, he sent off his bird, and the bird came back with a leaf, and that's when he knew that he'll go that way. And then he found his land more. Like that was our understanding. And here's the funny thing: is that when you go down to the Grand Canyons, you're gonna start seeing a lot of there's three cities built upon each other, right? The very last city, if you go down to the very last city, when you open it up, they find nothing but baby boys with their skulls smashed in, right? Mm-hmm. So why they try to figure out why is this happening, and then they realized in the Old Testament of the Bible, that's exactly what they used to do to the firstborn son. Mm-hmm. So you start questioning a lot of things, and then you start looking at in 1987 to 1994. When they started understanding the earthworks, or Ohio, the states of 66 degrees, they started taking DNA from Canadians right across Canada, and they found 32 to 34% or 38% of a lot of natives had this weird DNA signature.
Mm-hmm. Okay? That's what that talking about on the podcast. It's crazy.
Yeah. So here's the funny thing too. Then you go back to the States, the earthworks, and you go down to New York, the Smithsonian Museum, and then you start looking at what they have found there. It's called a Bat Creek stone, and it was written in ancient Phoenician, ancient Jew. So there's a lot of things that people have to understand, especially if the world, not only Canada and America, went through this big flood, but they also stated that at Mount Arafat, where Noah's Ark went too. So you have to realize that the whole world, we could have been separated, or this could have been the bed, or that could have been the bed. We don't know where the bed of civilization is, but they found a lot of ancient stuff all over America. And the funny thing is, nobody knows too much about it. They know more about Egypt than America. Cool question.
And there's one thing I wanted to kind of get to, especially before we end this, is I just want to say it is interesting because I don't necessarily think that that life permeated from Africa. A lot of people think that is this just Jewish bullshit.
Maybe Antarctica. Maybe Antarctica. We don't know.
Weird fucking shit, dude. Yeah. And there's like weird connections and like like that's why I love native folklore, is this idea of like that a lot of native folklore talks about like essentially aliens and how like the Hopi prophecies. I found the Seven Fires prophecies very interesting. The idea of like a white man would either come with a face of kindness or hatred or whatever the phrase is, and then what we saw, and what happened. But like it is interesting once you start to dive into a lot of this and question these things and it's something that you brought up that actually like legitimately pissed me off too. It's like these a lot of black people are now claiming that they're the natives of, and I was like, that is like such, and I remember hearing that years ago and I was like, that's fucking stupid. But you've brought that up recently and I want to kind of hear your thoughts, because like you see this with even there, and I'm not disparaging black people in any way, but you see this with Egypt too, where they're like, oh, we were Egyptians, and I'm like, no, there's like, you can literally put a face over the sarcophaguses, and they're essentially what they would classify as like an Aryan, not necessarily white, because the word Aryan actually is why Iran is called Iran, is what I mean, Aryan. There's a place in India called Aryan, right? So I'm like, it is weird that it's like they want to be like, we're everything and everybody, but it's like you're not though. So I want to hear your thoughts on that, because I know that pissed you off.
Well, when I looked at the aspect of what happened in Murder Missing Indigenous Women, 2013, they came to us. Okay, I was fucking two of those women, and I was married at the time. I'll be honest, we're separated now. I could talk about this shit, then I do feel bad, whatever. But however, it brings me to this idea. So I was a murder missing Indigenous woman. I think it was 2013. I let go of that page because me and my wife separated at the time, but I remember that. And what they wanted to do to us is to only blame the white people. You have a good page, they said, but you have to blame the white people in order for it to work. Even though Murder Missing Indigenous Women had a lot to do with, underlying issues of reservations, the high sexual abuse being reservation. And if 9 times out of 10, if you die, is because of underlying issues is drugs and sexual abuse. And who's sexually abusing these, or who's trafficking these women are the biggest gang systems in Canada, and they happen to be all Native American ran. So who's giving them the methamphetamine, all this crack and everything? And it turns into a nasty cycle. So I talked 100%. About these things, and they didn't like it, right? But when you look at what's going on with Murder Missing Indigenous Women, it turned political. Now look at Black Lives Matter. You can't say, you can't say white pride or anything. And you see what happened with Black Lives Matter. I could see from George Floyd, that was probably bullshit. Nobody else, that's bullshit. I feel like, honestly, the fucking man in the yellow hat talking to fucking Curious George, these Curious George bastards. I'm going to be honest with you. I do feel like that. And though I'm not trying to be racist, but I'm going to put it out there as racist so that way they can fucking listen to it. I understand that there's... Dealer. Exactly. He was a porn star, a drug dealer. Yeah, and now we're glorifying him. I mean, okay, building I get it.
Of a guy that put guns to pregnant women's stomachs and shit.
Yeah. So now they come over here and saying that first they came over here, they're trying to make deals with me on fucking TikTok saying that we have to come together because we can live together. Go fuck yourself. I don't lie for a history so we could destroy more white people. That's what it was. Black Lives Matter destroyed the aspect of white lives. And every single thing, no matter what, I understand there's a concept of it, but at the end of the day, it became used for politics only, not for the betterment of humanity, but for a lot
100%.
for power. So when I look at these black bastards coming up to over here with these looking like fucking garbage bags saying, "Oh, we're Native Americans and everything," like, okay, tell me what's your language, where's your customs culture, and they says no, and they have nothing, but they say that they're here, they're over there, they made all the whole things. I said, wow, you guys are overreaching. First, you guys did this. Now you're going to go against, you know what? I can play the biggest fucking victim too. I'm going to fucking roundhouse cock slap you sons of bitches if that's the fucking case. I was telling him. No offense.
Yeah,
But when it comes down, to, they say racism, no, this is the aspect of culturalism used for power, because if they claim Native American Indian, and then Trump comes through Canada and takes over Canada. If that was the case, the new policy states we're indigenous. So therefore, what happens? Then black people, if they claim that aspect of indigenous heritage, they just confuse these fucking idiots in the East Coast Native Americans who don't know their culture and they're not willing to fight for it. So somebody has to fight for it. So I said, I'll do it. And if they want to use racism to the aspect of damn things, I'll pull out my dick too. Let's put it on a table and drag it across. Let's see what's going on with that history. But they don't. They don't. And that's what they have to do. It's education. It's not so much of racism. If they want to play racism, I'll play that, because you know what? I'm not scared. I'll fight for the white people too.
You're right, though. Like, most people have been conditioned and programmed to believe everything that they do. Most things they believe is a fucking lie. Like this idea of like, oh, we need representation because of like, yeah, Canada there were some slavery aspects to it, but not even close to the United States. Like I said, more Irish people were brought here as slaves to begin with. And the word slave comes from Slavic, when the Ottoman Empire was enslaving white people under the white slave trade. So like, we need to come to these understandings that like, like I've said, I would way rather see native representation and embracing that culture more, and maybe blending it together with like, which we already kind of did to some extent, but even more wise of like white and the natives coming together and meshing together. Let's create this national identity that we should have done since the beginning. But this idea of like Indians or whoever it might be, I need representation. There's billions of you. There's an entire continent of you. And that's my problem. Is like, but yet now we have to come to this thing of DI, and now with planes are crashing because people are not being hired over the quality. They're being hired over their skin color, to be diverse, and all these things are being done. And people don't even realize what's happening to them, why it's being pushed, who's behind it, who's the NGOs that are doing this and pushing it, why they're doing this to like only the Western world. Is because they want to collapse it. They want to bring people into an economic depression of under a communist boot of the New World Order. Trump wanting to buy Canada. That is, people are like, I want to become the 51st state. Throw away everything your ancestors built and all the legacies of all of our families, the natives and the whites, that came together and built this what used to be a beautiful free country. And I said to you, bad things happen. We have to admit that, come to the truth and reconciliation of those things did happen, but we need to actually find common ground and realize, hey, we both have roots here at this point. We need to start to work together and fight against what's happening, because everyone, 51st state, I'm like, it's the New World Order. Do you not fucking see what's happening? They're literally trying to combine all these areas so then they have more easy centralized control over a mass population. And I'm like, man, you know, like, I see what's happening in Europe. It's fucked up, man. And if that comes here the way it is over there, there's going to be there's already stabbings in the streets. There's the amount of car accidents that has happened because Indians are pushed through the transport truck industry are killing people on the streets just because they literally don't know how to drive. I have friends that are from India and I've talked to him about this, and he's like, oh, my friend loves driving in Toronto because it's like India. And I was like, yeah, I heard you guys have like no rules over there. And he's like, yeah, we have no rules when it comes to cars and driving. And that's all those cultures are coming here. Like I just want to say this, I had an argument with like a guy was trying to troll me on TikTok, and he's trying to make videos of me, and I'm like blocking it or whatever. But he's like, you guys don't even know how to make mud huts. And I'm like, why are we wanting to make mud huts in Canada? That's not our culture, right? So I'm like, it's crazy. And they'll be like, you don't know how to make poop. You don't know how to make poop sculptures. And I'm like, it's crazy, dude, of the things that are trying to push on our culture.
I think we just need to, like I said, nationalize. And this is why I always said, I look at all these leaders. I look at Trump and the aspect of things, and honestly, who's the most powerfulest entity in the world right now? The United States. Okay.
Until
What
something
does
happens.
Yeah, but what does the United States want? We're the fourth largest producers in oil right now, and guess what province has most of the oil? What does he want? Alberta. He can't pretend that he doesn't want it, and he's a business guy. This is why he's putting these
He's
tariffs
the
on there. And
richest
let's just
country in
put
the
it,
world.
yeah, and
100%.
then we already know he has problems. He's 23rd, I think, on oil right now. United States is 23rd in oil, if I'm not mistaken. So if you bring that oil to the United States, would it be second largest producer in the world? So now you start looking at those kind of things, or third largest or second largest for sure. But that's what I say. You put those kind of things together. I'm not trying to be a conspiracist when it comes down to things, but okay. I look at Pierre Poilievre. What is the first thing he wants to do is make a 50-cent handshake with the Native Americans because he needs to make, let's say, this whole box right here is a natural law and reservations. I don't own a reservation. I'm a part of it. All the people are part of it. So we can put our houses anywhere we want. We don't tax it. So there's nothing to do with it. That's we know. But when you have a 50-cent handshake that goes in here, when you have the municipal, not the municipal, but the aspect of monetization come in here, every single thing has to be accountable, which means that I have to have a lot now. So if I have a lot and a company comes and buys it off of me for $1 million, I not only lost my lot, I lost my treaty status because I'm only bound to that little lot.
Yeah, parasite. I fucking hate that guy.
So now those kind of things, they're all a part. And this is why I would say Canada, the way it is right now, is not for you. Canada is not even for itself right now. What it really looks like is a hurt fucking dog. Justin Trudeau came over here to destroy everything, shut down the fucking pipeline, burned down Fort McMurray, shut that pipeline from going down to BC to make it into a bear sanctuary. He got all these
burn
political.
down half the country, man.
Yeah,
a tyrant over the ashes of his nation.
And I'll say this to the trucker convoy. Wasn't I right 4 years ago? Wasn't I right to all you bastards out there that said it has to be cowboys and Indians and only are going to come after our land? When you guys said it was about taxes and all the land and everything, didn't I point out 27 land stewardship acts 2 years ago with the help of Nikki's Funny Farm? We pointed it all out. Well, everybody was trying to chase their children. I said, they don't give a fuck about your children. They don't give a shit about me. They don't give a shit if I freaking whatever. They don't care. If I chop off my dick, threw down that, they don't care. They'll laugh at me. They don't care about you. What they want is that land. And now, up until last year, there's 27 new land stewardship acts that also have native, indigenous, has a lot to do with endangered water treatment. 2 years ago, 2 years ago, there was 18 derailments. And as soon as that happened, they started putting water policy. So people have to understand that when those fires in BC started happening, when you read those environmental acts, when you start reading it, if anything is burnt and it does not burn in 5 years, now you start looking at that burn line. It's all done because of a fucking pipeline. Why doesn't fucking people understand that? So, and it's these kind of things.
It's crazy. It's like that's why I wanted to bring you on the show, because you're like quite honest and upfront, and the same thing where I would stick up if this was happening. If they were just slaughtering African people, say, or whatever, or Chinese, yep, I would stick up for everybody. And that's the thing is and now because I see this destruction of white people and along with the natives, because either way, a lot of even Australia, right, wherever the natives exist, a lot of times because of the things of colonization, we also exist because of things like the British Empire at the time, at the height of its success, if you want to call it that or whatever. We've kind of been these chains are tied together. There's that image of it's a meme of a white guy with his roots dug into the ground in Canada against an Indian dude from India. And how the guy's just kind of staying there. He's like, our roots are dug into this ground, not as much as obviously the natives are, but our roots are still dug down in here. My ancestors and the things that they had to endure and die and survive and strive for is the same as yours did. We need to stop arguing with each other about this or that or what happened 100 years ago or 50 years ago even, because at the end end of the day, they're coming after all of us, and we need to like put our forces together, or this is not going to work. And you're right, like, you know, we pay property tax, and if I don't pay that property tax, they'll take my fucking house away. So we're not free. Everyone's like, oh, we have this or that. You're not free. We're taxed into poverty and death as Canadian citizens. We are the highest tax country in the entire fucking world almost, and I see it every paycheck. It's hundreds and hundreds of dollars to things that I never agreed to send it to fucking Ukraine for proxy wars, or like Jeremy McKenzie from Dagalon was breaking down it's crazy, dude. Like, a couple $1 million for a gender study in Uganda. Here they will throw some tax dollars for it was like something like condoms and Rhodesia or something like crazy. Like, it's so the absurd shit that they'll put our tax money to. They're just crippling us into slavery and debt servitude to the powers that be. That's fucked.
That's so true. That's so true. And that's what we have to understand. Like, you know, the way I look at it is the cowboy, he put his blood in this land, whether it was wars or not, there's blood in this land. Now that we came to the aspect of decay, we formed Canada the way it had to be. Doesn't matter how it was made. We both have our blood into it. Now, what do? Instead of looking at each other, okay, we're fighting each other. Now we have a different enemy. Fuck these guys. How do we do it? Let's just do it the right way. And if they want to come over here, like we don't tell China to make their Chinese country English or anything. We don't tell them that. That's stupid. Why should, you know, we're supposed to be multicultural? No, I think the way it has to be is we have to understand that it's not about trying to hate the world. It's about coming together and say, hey, we didn't even figure out our shit. Now you want to throw all these bastards on our stuff? No, let's figure, you know what I mean?
That's a good
let's figure it out.
That's a great point, dude. If like that, we need to figure out our own shit or how to like come together. Because like, think about it, if you had a government that were nationalist on the white side and nationalist on the native side, and they were collectively cohesive, because that's the idea of like, we need a cohesive culture like that feels like a family. And that's what I felt like, right? Most of my friends were either white or native. That's a fact. Like so I'm like, that's what that's how I grew up in. Jeremy made this point on one of his podcasts, and like the most thing I had to do with my idea of what an Indian person was Apu on The Simpsons. We didn't have this concept, and now they're claiming like we've been. So I did this research because they're like, we've been here since 1820. There was 10 people from India, and most of the population has came in the last 10 to 15 years. Some of them came in the early 90s, but they like are trying to claim that they're part of what we are. And I'm like, you're not, and you never will be. And I don't give a shit if people don't like that, but that's the fact. You're not Canadian. You'll never be Canadian of what it means to be Canadian. Just because you show up here and walk onto our land. And that's why I really think it makes sense to have this cohesive relationship of like the white man and the native need to come together and be like, put our differences aside. And like, I always love this. There was a meme where it was like red and white make it right. And it was like a native and a white guy clasping hands. And it's kind of true that that's what we need to do.
Yes. And that I believe that to be very, if nobody wants to, you know, acknowledge that there's an elephant in the fucking room, they're the problem. That's why I look at it. And, you know, and biggest problem whenever I go into these, let's just say, whether it's, on stage or anything, I look down and I say, you know what the problem is, you white people? And they say, what? You're white. And they look at me and says, do you know what the solution is? What? You're white. And they look at me, what does that mean? If you look at yourself as a problem because you're white, then you're the problem. But if you realize that you're white and you're the solution by being proud of being white, and that's the solution. See, this is why I've always said
no one will say that
separate.
from a different color, man. It's like crazy, like, and that's why that's why I wanted to have you on the show, because you tell it like it is.
Well, it's so true, and it's not even about racism. It's psychology. It's just basic true psychology. How the fuck are we gonna go into doing something if the biggest problem they see is in the fucking mirror?
Yeah.
You see? It's so simple.
I did a video on that white guilt, and I was like, that's the biggest problem with white people is the self-destruction of our identity of like, we need to feel bad for everybody else because of something that they claimed our ancestors did, which were mostly just parasitic governments. Like, if you actually study all that stuff, it does come back to Israel a lot of times.
It's a lie from people that weren't even fucking there. You got all these people, you got these people that are black and yellow and all these other people that have no fucking business talking about our problem, telling that white man, you did this and everything, and then they're putting more gas on the fire. They're just like, the way I call them is like just like white saviors. And I'll give you an example. Just like, you ever watch that movie? It's called Dangerous Minds with Michelle Pfeiffer, and she goes over and says the black people. Well, now this is exactly what these bastards come over here and say to us. They say you have to hate the white people. Even the white people say that. You know, they say all these. Oh, I'm sorry. It's the and yet they're not willing to bring a fucking bridge. I say, okay, build a bridge. I like to meet your white elders and you can meet my native elders. And they said, no, they don't like you. No. Well, what the fuck are you doing except breeding hate?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. And I think this was, I always thought that I did the podcast for a reason, right? And I'm supposed to be doing this, and bringing people like you on has always been one of my favorites. I've had many different guests, different people with very different thoughts, right? I had a guy named Adam Green on, who is very outspoken about the Zionist stuff and thinks that essentially all Abrahamic religions were created by the Jews. And then I had the next week Dustin Nimoy's on, who thinks that the Jews are demons, and they've had debates. So, and I'll have different people on, and I'll have these like, okay, like let me hear what you have to say. We'll have a conversation about it, because at the end of the day, I keep repeating this, that they're coming after all of us. It doesn't matter where you come from, who you are, what your skin color is, but what is going to like. We're not going to see this spiritual awakening in my lifetime. I would hope so.
We just have to wait for the swastikas to fly. That's it. Because at the end of the day, people are going to sit there. What the fuck's happening in Canada?
Most people don't even know, dude. Like NPCs.
Yeah, and then what's going to happen is people are going to, if that comes out the most offensive symbol and they start talking about it as to why, then people will say, I'll tell you why, because we're sick and tired of your shit. We might as well bring this and talk about the elephant in the room. Next, let's talk about the white man in the room. Let's talk about these issues in the room, because they don't want to talk about it.
It's true. And we can end it on kind of that, but like it is such, like we have to embrace who we are as Canadians and put our differences aside no matter what it is, and collectively come together. And I really enjoyed this conversation. I definitely have you back on. It'd be interesting if you'd ever be wanting to like maybe talk about more of the folklore stuff, and maybe can do an episode more based on conspiracy aspects, because there's so many interesting connections to like certain things that people don't want to talk about or whatever. But I'm open to having all sorts of conversations. We've done some very controversial episodes on the show because I choose to question everything, even my own beliefs and what I think and feel, and form new opinions and ideas based on evidence and facts. But you know, like I was gonna say, most people are like NPCs. We used to call them sheeple. You're older than I am, probably, where they were sheep, right? They just went along with the herd. And everyone's like NPCs in these video game terms. But there's so many people there. It's like, oh, the government didn't tell me to say it, so you know, and then it's like the amount of people I see like that, I'm like, it blows my mind. I'm like, we're looking for the people that are awake, that realize what's going on, not the people that are regurgitating what the government lies are telling you. If you haven't awoken and you're not awake, not woke, but if you're not awake to what's happening past COVID, if that didn't wake you up, I don't know what the fuck is going to.
Amen.
You know? So,
okay, buddy, I better let you go.
Yeah, shout out your stuff. If you want to tell people where to find you and all that stuff, definitely do that.
Okay, you can find me on TikTok, just Adrien the Realist, and yeah, that's about it. We're going to be doing some more, I guess, if we're going to talk, we could do some more talks down the line. Thank you for having me on the show here. So yeah, thank you very much.
Maybe we'll do like a live. I never go live on TikTok, but maybe we'll do a live on there too, to try to maybe bring people into the conversation and point them towards this episode once it comes out, to really try to motivate people to, hey, here, listen to what we're having to say about bringing people together, you know. But yeah, I thank you for having on. Like it was a great conversation, I think. So I'll play the outro intro. You can you can go. But it was good talking to you, dude.
You too, buddy. Have a good day. Okay, bye.